Good morning. This is the Blaine World podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And get more information, listen to previous shows at our website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I can't see it, but it's behind me. Anyway, I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield. I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And to that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Mark Potts, who's a retired journalist and CEO of LocAlmanac, for being my guest today. And Mark, once again, you can feel free to wave to all your friends and friends who are watching this. And Mark, I have to tell you before we begin, I'm impressed with your background there. This is your office you're operating out of?
I'm in my wife's office, but that's not the background of her office. That's an artificially generated AI background created by a company called All 3D out in California that I'm an advisor to. And it's completely fake.
You told me off the air that not only is it completely fake, but you can change everything in it.
Yep, you can change the color of the lamp, you can change the design of the lamp, you could change the artwork, you could change the plant, you could probably change the color of the wall, you could put a different table back there, all with a click. It's really amazing technology. They do work for a lot of major retailers and publications in AI created photorealistic
Now,
images.
you mentioned you can change it with a click. Can you change it on your end, or do they have to change it on their end?
No, I can't change it on my end. I'm using just a still photo from their site, but with their tools you can. I've used their tools, and you can make it do whatever you want. You can arrange a whole room.
Okay, I should check into it. So in my case, if I ever did it, I could also give myself a full head of hair.
I think so.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, I don't think they don't. They do things, not people.
Oh, okay,
So
gotcha.
it wouldn't help for that.
But we'll talk about it. The things that AI can do is really cool. I don't know if you've used it, but I've used it even in terms of pictures of me. Or it's really cool to create caricatures. Have you ever done that? And
Yeah, imagery and music and all sorts of things.
and then the other thing was I just recently I made myself look older. I said, how would I look at 96? And it came out, it was amazingly well done. So and the thing, Mark, is incredible. There's no charge to a lot of it. It's just absolutely free. I should mention that Mark is a retired reporter and editor at the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, and other newspapers and magazines. He created one of the first digital newspaper prototypes for the Washington Post in the 1990s. I can't believe it's been around that long.
30 years.
And has developed strategies and products business of numerous media and technology companies. Currently, the CEO of a startup called LocAlmanac in Lawrence, Kansas, a company that's building local information dashboards for communities using AI. Mark says he has an interest in learning more about AI, join the crowd, but he's not an expert, at least not yet, but he's very curious and open to discussion. Before we get into that discussion, Mark, which I'm interested in as well, let me ask you back to when you were a kid growing up in, I guess, Lawrence, Kansas, was it? Is that
Connecticut.
Oh, Connecticut, I'm sorry. So you grew up in Connecticut. Were you interested in journalism as a kid?
Yeah, I was the kid who published the local neighborhood newspaper and worked for the high school newspaper. I mostly did radio in high school and early college, and then I moved back into newspapers in college, and that became my career.
So as a kid, so you mentioned you published an actual newspaper?
It was a mimeograph thing about the new house in the neighborhood or whatever.
Very cool. What was the name of it?
I have no idea.
You don't remember? Did you get it off the ground, or did somebody else get it off the ground?
Oh, it was just something a bunch of us kids did. It wasn't anything real serious.
I have no idea. Do you still have a copy of the first issue?
I don't think so. My mom might have one somewhere.
Very cool. I can't believe you didn't keep that. So in terms of that paper, you then graduated. Do you remember the very first time you ever got paid to be a reporter?
I was paid to cover high school sports when I was in high school by the Westport News in Westport, Connecticut.
Yeah, so what did that entail? You went to the games and wrote them up?
Yep, went to the games, kept score, and wrote them up. I think I got $3 or $5 or something like that for an article.
Very cool. Yeah, I still remember my first paper. I got paid, probably got paid 15 a week. And I'll tell you off there a story about that a little bit later on. but $3 an article, wherever you submitted, that's probably pretty cool then,
It was a lot of money for back then.
exactly. So then you went from high school to college. Did you major in journalism in college?
Yes, I did.
And what was your major?
Journalism.
So you mentioned to me off the air, primarily at that time you were into print and then you switched to radio or vice versa.
My high school had a radio station, and one of the few FM radio stations at a high school in the country. So I did a lot of that, and then worked on an AM radio station in college, but I drifted into back into the newspaper in college.
So what was the drift getting away from the radio and into print?
I don't know. It was I'm not sure why I made that drift. It was by sophomore year I had switched over to the print side.
And thinking about it out loud here, you kind of were in print in a great time. Is I don't know about you, or I know about you, but I was a newspaper junkie also. And used to love newspapers more. I'd read like 3 or 4 newspapers a day, and get it. People don't do that anymore. I mean, what a shame that newspapers are folding, and they're not growing. Did you see that happening in your career?
Oh, absolutely. But I think I helped cause it to happen by helping to create digital newspapers. But I think it's just a different form of news. It's of news production. We're still getting news. We're just getting it on our phones and on our computers. There's nothing magical about it being on paper. I haven't gotten a print newspaper regularly in 15 or 20 years. Um, everything is digital now,
So
and that's the trend, and that's why we're seeing newspapers are going out of business, but news is not going out of business.
good point. It's funny you say that though, because my wife made me stop getting Wall Street Journal. I used to love reading the Wall Street Journal, but I don't know about you, but they were piled up in my office. I had like
Hmm.
weeks because I don't know about you, but I could always read the Wall Street Journal even weeks later. It'd still be interesting. But she said, I had to stop because I had literally weeks and weeks of Wall Street Journal, and I switched. But once I made the switch to digital, thanks to you, I never looked back. I love reading stuff digitally. How in your reading, personal reading habits? Do you like reading digital, or do you still read books and stuff, hard copies of stuff?
I read almost everything digitally.
You really? Even books and novels?
Yeah,
Me too. I mean, I just love it. And it's just easy. But some people still say they read a hardcover copy of a book. But to me, it's no thrill.
people talk about the romance of having paper in their hands and getting ink on their hands, I guess. I think it's just, again, I don't think it's a major. We're still reading, words on a page. It's just a digital page rather than a print page.
I always wonder, too, when I tell people, so if I read a book on my iPad, is that reading a book, or what do you call it? What?
I think it's definitely reading. The big question is if you have an audio book, is that reading a
Well, good
book?
point. And I
That's an interesting question. I don't do audio books, so I don't have to worry about it.
have you ever done audiobooks?
No.
So I love it. I think I was telling you off there, we just got a dog. And I walk the dog at night and I'm listening to a great book of George Byrne, not George Byrne, by Mel Brooks. I'm just loving it. Um,
Hmm.
by the way, I'll make a recommendation. Do you have HBO?
No, I don't. I've heard the Mel Brooks special is very good though. I read that book.
Oh, really? But it's the
Yeah.
best. But you read the book, but I'm loving listening to him deliver.
Hmm.
Now it's the book. So that's an interesting point you just made. It's kind of fun to read the book, wasn't it? Fun to read
Yes.
the book.
Yeah.
It's really fun to listen to him. I'm just loving it. So the TV show is just kind of a condensation of what you read in the book, but I'm loving it. So that's an interesting point you raised, though. So can I say I'm reading to it or listening to it, or whatever you want is fine.
I think it's a weird fine point. I think you're getting the information either way. It doesn't matter how you're getting it.
Well, that's true. It's funny though, because a friend of mine just wrote a novel and he sent me the PDF file. But I wanted it on audio, so I think there are ways to convert it, but he doesn't have it. It's not available on audio yet. But your point's well taken.
Well, here's a trick. Put it into Notebook LLM, which is Google's text to audio program, and you can get it as an audio book.
Somebody told me that. What is it called?
It's called
Notebook?
Notebook
And
by Google.
is it easy to operate?
Extremely. And what's amazing about it is it will summarize the book if you want it to. It'll read it to you. It'll even create. We actually did this for our company for just for fun. We took our company plan, 3-page company plan, and gave it to Notebook, and it produced a 20-minute podcast of two people talking back and forth about our company. It took, I think, 6 minutes to produce a 20-minute podcast, and it sounds like two people having a podcast discussing the company. It's
Who
remarkable.
who are the two people?
They're two computer generated people.
Well, that's interesting to do. I could have done this whole interview with you. I mean, we could have just done it, via have somebody else do it for us and talk for us. And you had the choice on voices, what it would be.
No, no, I'm sure you can. I just put it in and let it do its thing.
Somebody have to get into that. It's
They
sad.
made jokes, they had asides, they actually raised some issues that we actually hadn't talked about. It was really interesting.
Well, what's sad about it, it's interesting. It's sad because a buddy of mine is a voiceover artist, pretty well known, but it's affecting his industry,
Oh
because
yeah.
we don't need him anymore. And that's the change. Let's talk about that a little bit because I know you're interested in the topic as well, but it is going to affect, I mean, it is affecting jobs though, right? The people used to do stuff, you can now have AI do it for you.
I think in some cases, yeah, I think it's affecting low-level graphics jobs because it's very easy to do graphics on AI. It is totally impacting the software industry. I talked to a very senior software developer the other day who said his job is over. He just supervises AI now. He doesn't have to write. He does not have to write code anymore because the AI writes code better than he can write code. So you've got that. You've probably got some voiceover impact. You've got some impact probably in some clerical jobs of analyzing simple content. The problem is the technology is still not quite ready for prime time, so it takes a lot of supervision. As a friend of mine says, think of AI as an intern that you have to manage, that makes a lot more sense.
Well, yeah, it's funny you said that because even in terms of reviews of books, um, I'll be curious, or I'll ask for a review of a movie, and then sometimes I'll get a review, and then I'll say put in my own words, and I'll put in my own words. So it's incredible that
Yeah,
no offense to movie critics, but their job is going to be, somewhat changed. That
yeah.
you keep human effect. So let me ask you this, Mark, in terms of people, if you will, or society overall, what should they do in terms of worrying about, like, I don't have to worry now about a job, we don't have to worry about a job. We saw it, my daughter, or, my daughter's daughter, whatever. What should people be thinking about or looking at going down the road?
I don't know. I think it's going to be like any technology where it's going to eliminate things and it's going to create new things. And there'll be, different kinds of jobs that are created by it that are, no more than the computer replaced the typewriter and changed a whole lot of secretarial jobs and clerical jobs. Um, I feel like we've seen this movie a couple times before, and we have to remember that there is this weird, you know, situation where, we don't really understand what the future is bringing. It's just bringing something different, but it's okay that it's different. We have to sort of play along until we find out what that difference is and how to cope with it. I don't think it's going to eliminate mass quantities of jobs. I think it's going to eliminate some jobs and change a lot of other jobs and create a lot of opportunities.
Well, you mentioned a good example in terms of secretaries. Secretaries. Um, I think TV show Mad Men. My dad was in advertising too, and everybody used to have their own secretary. But then now no secretaries anymore. Um, and so it's sad in the sense that you moved, I guess, into other fields. It wasn't an easy transition. Especially you get trained as a secretary, you go to school to become a secretary, and now shorthand, there's no shorthand anymore. There's no, typist. So all that whole field went. So it's just that worries me, but I think about it that what can we be in a field that's not going to be affected by AI? And I think that's kind of a cool thing you can find that.
I think there are going to be certainly physical fields that are not affected. Um, but we don't know. We're really early in the game, and I think everybody kind of looks at it as, oh my God, the world's ended. AI is here. No, the early parts of AI have shown up, but it's kind of like looking at the iPhone when it first came out and saying, well, this does some cool things, but it doesn't have an app store yet, and it doesn't, do all these other things. And we look back 15 years later and like, wow, that was a pretty crude device that we were so excited about 15 years ago, but look what it does now. And I think that's going to be true of AI. I think I say it's the most overhyped and underhyped technology I've ever seen at the same time. Um, and we don't know yet where it's going. We've gotten a little bit overexcited about it because it hit the consumer market probably before it was ready for people to use it. But there are several hundred million people who use AI every day. It's between ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and all the other available versions of it, people are using it. They're using it for you know, writing term papers or taking notes on something or editing things or creating art or creating music. There's a lot of things it does. It doesn't do them all well. It doesn't do many of them well, but it will over time as the technology develops.
You mentioned something interesting, overhyped and underhyped. How so can it kind of be both?
Well, I think it's overhyped in that it came to market too early, and we were, everybody's like, "Oh my God, it's going to change everything, and I'm going to use it to do all my clerical work, etc." Well, it's not ready for that yet. The underhype is, I think, it is going to cause some really incredible change that we can't even imagine um, over the next few years. I think we got a glimpse of that literally in the last couple of weeks. There's a new program um, called, it keeps changing its name. It was called Moltbot last week. It literally allows things within uses AI to connect things within your computer and do chores for you. And it's like, it's like the science fiction robot where you say, "Hey, robot, set up a trip to Barbados and put it on my calendar and hit my bank account for it." And it can do all that now. It doesn't do it well. It's got real security issues. But literally, this has arrived in the last couple of weeks and is the talk of Silicon Valley. And I think what we're looking at is the way computers will be working in 3 or 4 years is this, as these sort of agents of AI infect everything we do on a computer.
What's scary, and I think I mentioned this to you off the air, that you expect certain things with AI, but I wasn't prepared for the fact that AI makes mistakes, you know.
Absolutely.
And I thought, you punch in, but have you seen that too, or you worried about that?
I, Absolutely. I was listening to some music and I asked AI to tell me about the music and it was wrong and I knew it was wrong. And I said, "You're wrong." And it thought about it and said, "Oh yes, I am wrong. It's this." And it got it right on the second try. It was completely wrong the first time, of who was performing and when the performance was, and got it right on the second try. It was really interesting.
And I told you I had a similar experience where I was asking how long would it take me to get someplace, and instead of 12 hours, it told me 60 minutes or something. But
This is the overhyped aspect. It's not ready for prime time.
what was nice about it though, Mark, is at least they apologized to me.
Well, yeah, but it's still wrong.
Well,
It's the intern you have to manage. You have to think of it that way.
what my wife likes, but it's kind of scary too, is that you almost develop a relationship, with it. It says, and it knows you, and it gets to know you better and better, and that's good, but scary too. And it knows our dog, Mark. It knows what our dog likes and doesn't like, and says, Bodie would like this, and maybe Bodie's not ready for prime time, whatever. It's just amazing that that's happening.
Well, and that's caused some psychological issues. It's caused some suicides,
Yeah,
unfortunately, because people trust it too much and think it is a companion. Again, that's the overhyped part. This is something that really wasn't intended for that, or is not ready for that. That's being used, for therapy by people, and advice that maybe not the best idea, and probably there should be some warnings on that before people use it that way.
yet there are. It's happening too, though. People use AI for relationships,
Hmm.
if you're by yourself and you want to have an AI friend or whatever, it's just kind of it's happening. Mark, fast forward a little bit on that. So you got out of journalism, print journalism, well, how many years ago?
I've been in and out of print journalism constantly. I was actually the editor of the newspaper here in Lawrence, Kansas, about 12, 13 years ago for a while. I've gone back and forth. I was the editor of a magazine about California for a few years, about 5 years ago. Um, so I've moved back and forth between print and digital over the years.
Right now, you're not doing print per se.
I don't, no print.
Okay. So talk about the fact that I think it was really cool. So that at some point in time, you decided to have you started your own startup.
Yeah, I started a company with a friend about 6 months ago called LocAlmanac. And what LocAlmanac is doing is using AI to create, we call them dashboards for local communities. You'll be able to go to our site or go to somebody who uses our site. It'll be on a city site or on a media site, and you can find out what city council did last night, what the local calendar is for the next few weeks. Um, you can ask it, what do I do to get rid of hazardous waste? It'll tell you if there have been any building permits issued in your neighborhood. All this stuff is out there and it's in city documents and in media. But what we do is send AI out to get it for our community and build these dashboards. We're launching the first one in Wichita, Kansas, in the next few weeks, and then hopefully going all over the world. But it's a really interesting use of AI, and it's got some interesting wrinkles to it in terms of what we can do um, with regard to that issue about truth and facts. There are things we can do to validate sources that we've built into it, and some really interesting context we can add, where we can do a story on a real estate development as it moves through a planning commission, and not just trace it through the planning commission, tell you what is going on at the planning commission, but tell you when the next meeting is, tell you who you should contact if you want to know more or oppose it, uh, cite the relevant zoning code that is behind that project, tell you about the developer. We can do that by tapping into all the data that's out there and using AI to knit it all together.
Now, what's sad about that in a sense, and that's what the local newspapers used to do a lot of that, and not
Yep.
like some of it, but it was really people would cover meetings and tell you what's happening. And now you can go to this website you're developing or program you're developing, and it'll get all that information plus more, right?
Yeah, and it is information. We really don't call it news because that is what humans do and what newspapers do. It's more about information, but it does have crossover. One of the sources we use is a group called Documenters, which actually sends people to local meetings to take notes and write them up. And we can then take that and synthesize it with the other information or create summaries of the reports that they do. Um, but this reflects the real lack of it's not replacing anything because what's replacing is already gone. Newspapers are not covering meetings like they used to. They don't have the staff. They don't have the money to afford the staff. Things are not being done that we took for granted. And when you look back what newspapers were a century ago. They were this kind of really granular, neighborhoody kind of news that has not been done for years. That some of which we can bring back by using AI to go out and fetch it from sources that are already out there but are not plainly available.
No, what I find kind of interesting that we're talking about is it has me wondering who's going to pay for this. In other words, that you're the company, the startup, and I assume at some point in time you want people to pay for this service, or is that the
I don't
part?
think we don't want people to pay for the service. We're actually going to make it freely available to anybody who wants it. There are some business opportunities for selling versions of it, sort of hyped up versions of it to consultants and to city governments. There's also some interesting models where aggregating information from around the country has some real value that we can sell. But it also doesn't cost a whole lot to build, and that's the big difference. A newspaper is an expensive proposition to run. We don't have people, so it's a lot less expensive to do this.
Would there be advertising in this?
Not planning to, no.
Okay. And actually, I'm just trying to see the business model of it. So who would consumers subscribe to this, or how would it be set up?
Consumers can get it via newsletters. We can create podcasts for it. We can create alert agents for them. It could be, if a newspaper wants to pick up the report, we certainly make it available to them. If a the city website in Wichita is going to put Local Almanac on the site, so you'll have because they have trouble getting information out in a really clear way. We're a way to make it easier for people to find the city information. So they'd have a feed of our things, and our agents would be available for people to use in their site.
You see, it eventually being, it's going back to when there are newspapers, could people then eventually get the stuff printed out? Is that the model?
If they want to, sure, sure.
Okay, it's just so if you miss a newspaper, you get 472 pages of this every day, if you're at your home. That's really cool. What gave you the idea?
Um, my partner originally started talking about, my partner's heavily involved in digital governance. She's actually an international expert on it, and she called me 7 or 8 years ago with an idea to look at a way to cover local meetings by using local citizens to write things up. Um, and we both thought that was a great idea, but we never really got around to it. And COVID came, and we went off and did other things. And then I called her about a year ago and said, you know that idea you had? What if we used AI to do the work? And she said, that's it. So that's when we started building this.
Now, this model, you're talking about AI, conceivably, you could just have people tape record however you want to do it, meetings, and then transpose it into written report.
That's happening now. There are services out there that grab videos of meetings and provide transcripts of them and provide summaries of them. There are people who are already doing that, and we'll tap into that.
Okay. It's just thinking out loud with you is where it'll go back there on the develop point. I guess nobody knows. You can just take guesses, but it's a fascinating concept in that it's not dissimilar to when PCs came out or computers came out. Who would have thought we could be doing? I'm looking at my TV streaming. You go to movies yet, and you said a very good point that you're streaming. I'm reading some movie theaters are making comebacks. People are still going out to movies. And you've seen
Mhm.
that they like that experience as opposed to watching it at home. So what used to be, you'll maybe come back in the future, whatnot. So what do? Do you like stay awake at night and think this out, or where this all going?
No, I don't lie awake at night thinking about it. I just sort of keep an eye on what I do as a user and try to understand if that's something other people do. And I look at what new technologies come along and try to think of ways to apply them. Um, when I got started with digital 30 years ago at the Post, um, it was based on a memo that our managing editor had written saying this is something we need to get involved in. And I read the memo and I said, I know how to build an electronic newspaper on a computer in a way that, as a prototype, in a way that he described. And I did, and I brought it to work and I had a new job the next day. Um, and it's interesting because the memo that he wrote, and you just sort of triggered something when you mentioned something a couple minutes ago. The memo he wrote was based on a conference that Apple had put on in Japan about the future of media that he went to. And it's a remarkable memo, and it really presages everything that happened except one thing. It mentions nothing about mobile. There is no sense that anything would be in the palm of your hand. Everything was still a desktop idea back then. And the idea that we could put Washington Post stories on a computer and people would be able to read them and they could pay them for us. But the word mobile was nowhere near it. And it was a year or two before we even started exploring that because the technology didn't exist. I mean, literally, this is before the internet existed, or the internet existed before the web existed. Um, we were building stuff that we had no idea how to deliver in the early days, and we worked with Apple and IBM and Oracle and Microsoft building prototypes in the early 90s that were just, gee, let's try this. Wouldn't this be cool if we did this? We didn't know how it was going to be delivered, and it was, it was not until the mid 90s when CompuServe and then cable modems and things started happening that we understood how to deliver what we were building.
When you started delivering all this stuff or bringing it to fruition, did you get resistance?
Oh God, yes.
Mm.
Absolutely. The same kind of, as you say, people prefer paper. Newspapers, one of the reasons newspapers are in the state they're in now is because they didn't innovate back then. Um, I have a slide that I use in presentations about all the things that I know for a fact the Washington Post had a chance to invest in and didn't. AOL, Netscape, Facebook, they turned down. Um, the Washington Post owned the original cell service in Washington, D.C. for a while. All these things that, would have been totally transformational if they passed on, and got left behind as a result. And the whole newspaper industry was like that. Every newspaper company had those stories. I was in the room when the Post was offered 10% of AOL for $10 million and said no thanks, and that was, a multi-billion-dollar mistake. Um, I was in the room when a group of newspapers were offered the Excite discussed buying the Excite search engine back in the late 90s and said, no, it'll be too expensive. And yeah, a year later, it sold for 10 times as much as they could have paid for it then. They just, newspapers could have done Craigslist and didn't do Craigslist. Newspapers certainly could have done Google and didn't do Google. In fact, the Wall Street Journal did Google. The Wall Street Journal had an amazing search engine before Google called RankDex that was built by a developer at Dow Jones, and the journal didn't know what it had, and he left. We all used it because it was really cool. He left and founded Baidu, which is the Google of China. It's one of the biggest companies in the world, and it was that technology that he took with him when he left. They had it. They let it walk out the door.
You mentioned this, and it's bringing back like memories, AOL, and people complaining when you had to wait on the phone, but the connection to go through. And I remember it. But
All those noises.
let me ask you, you're giving me an idea. I'm sure other people had the idea. I'm sure you are as well. Could you, and people are researching it, do AI for what's going to happen in 5 years from now? We have this model now. What's it going to look like in 5 years?
It'll look very different. Just like if we think back 5 years ago, we didn't have AI, and we
Right.
barely had phones, and things change that rapidly. I always tell people, don't get hung up on today's technology, because if you think back 10 years to what you thought was hot 10 years ago and couldn't imagine what was happening now, spin forward 10 years, you can't imagine what's going to happen in 10 years. We don't know. As I said, I think there's going to be some real changes that AI is going to bring us in how we interact with computers, where, we talk to Alexa now, we talk to Siri, but it's going to be something much more powerful in 3 or 4 years, I think, as we can talk to them and they can then activate a whole string of AI commands to do something. And, just like I said, find me a trip and figure out how to pay for it and do an itinerary and, do the whole thing and give it to me when you're done. Make all the reservations. That's actually getting really close, and it's going to be a lot more possible in a year or two.
Let me ask you this, Mark. In terms of the people who listen to this, regardless of their age, what should they be doing to be better prepared for it, or to be accepting of it when it happens?
Accept is a good word. I tell people try everything. I tell young people that especially. Uh, I tell young people, if you're in a company and a new technology comes along, be the expert in that technology, because you'll be the first one there and you'll be the smart one as a result. Uh, be accepting. I think there is, humans naturally resist change and are afraid of change. So, oh God, that seems so weird. I don't want to do that. It's awful for whatever reason. And there are certainly legitimate concerns about AI now that we have to take into account, but that's not a reason to say I'm not going to ever use it. I see people say, "Oh, keep that junk out of my face. I'm never going to use it." I literally heard somebody the other day say, "I don't like AI for content. It's terrible, but I just used it to do this, this, and this." And I'm like, "Wait a second. You just said you don't like it, and you just used it. You know, Listen to yourself." I think, as I said, a lot more people are using AI than most people realize. It is literally several 100 million people are using it every day for various things. I think there are folks like creative people who resent it because they see their jobs being threatened, and that's really understandable. There are people, though, who don't write well, who think AI is a godsend because now they can get something written that they could not have done on their own. Or, we use AI for art. I can't do art, but I can get somebody to do a logo for me in AI. I get AI to do a logo that is better than, I could pay somebody $500 to do.
You mentioned
That's
I gave you a compliment off the air. I was very impressed with the artwork behind you. I said, "Wow, Mark, I didn't
it's
know this
just a piece
artist."
of AI.
Really, it makes me, speaking to you, makes me grateful that I'm not teaching anymore though, because
Yes, me too.
um, you know, I used to have students write papers, but now what's interesting is you're gonna have to go back to where people don't have to write in class, because
Yep.
if I can take home anything,
Blue
uh,
books are back.
isn't it something? But it's changing. So I guess just being open. So I try to think about things that I'm grateful that I don't have to live through or deal with. But that's been one example. But I tell students, young folks, whatever, is try to get them something though that it's not going to be impacted by AI. It's probably getting harder and harder to find things that are being impacted. You but I used to think I'm a big theater fan, but theater and movies, it's being impacted by AI as well. And it's
Live theater will be harder. Movies are going to be completely different in 10 years because you'll basically be able to say, I'd love to see a romantic comedy starring Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant set on a boat in the Mediterranean. And, half an hour later, you'll have a 2-hour movie to watch that'll be just yours.
can you imagine that? Just
Yeah.
and I can't comprehend it, but you point out spot on that things 10 years ago I couldn't comprehend, 20 years. But what's interesting, Mark, the speed at which it's changing though is increasing too. Would you say that so? That
I think so. I think so. I think, I think we're living through an amazing time of innovation. It's like the Industrial Revolution all over again. When everything around us is, totally different than it was when we were kids. Even for young folks, they're seeing, real change in something that they took for granted 5 or 10 years ago.
I forget the name, it might be Moore's Law or something along those lines. But they talk about the rapidity, is it Moore's Law? Something like that, right?
Moore's law that computing power doubles every 18 months.
Yeah. And so it seems that's what's happening. Stuff we talk about is changing, rapidly. And I think a good example of that sort of is when you think about fax machines. And remember with fax machines, we thought they were the greatest thing since cream cheese. And now there's no fax machines,
Long gone,
And
long gone.
the paper, remember that the rolls of paper, you get all that crumpled stuff. That's incredible. Mark, where do you see this taking you? In other words, I want to encourage you. Hopefully, it'll be a book. Are you going to write a book on all this?
Oh God, no. I've done books. I don't want to do books anymore. Writing books is a horrible pursuit. Uh, I don't know where it goes. I'm older than most entrepreneurs. I'm fascinated by what we're doing with LocAlmanac. I think my partner and I both are in it more for the exploration. We don't have this great dream to make $1 million. We don't have incredible ambitions for it. It's so experimental that we really just want to do it and see what we get. We've literally in developing it, we've discovered things that we didn't know it would do, that have made it much more interesting and better just literally in the last few weeks. Um, as we've understood what the technology does and how we can use it. So we're really in it kind of it's I don't want to say it's fun, but we're in it for the exploration of it, which is very different than startups. I did startups, I've done startups for 25 years, and usually you had a plan and you had, uh, a goal of hopefully taking over the world and making $1 zillion, and you had to go out and raise a lot of money. This thing has not taken a lot of money to raise. We've gotten a couple small grants to fund what we're doing, but it's nothing like it was 20 years ago when when you started a company, you had to write all your software from scratch. That's not how it is anymore.
Even the name itself. How you come up with the name? Or you just punch it into AI?
No, I did that. I love naming things. It was the notion of local and information put together, that it would be an almanac, a local almanac, for a city, that it would be, the things you need to, like I said, the dashboard to live in a town.
I know you're coming out. You mentioned you're out there at my neck of the woods, North Carolina, to speak at a group in the near future. Um, when you speak, what's the topics you speak on?
That day, I'm going to be talking about how newspapers blew it. I'm talking to a journalism class run by my friend Graham Browning, and I'm going to talk about how newspapers screwed this up. That the newspapers could have triumphed and could have, they wouldn't still be newspapers, but they would be the leaders in this field. I mean, I think newspapers had the monopoly on news and information, or a near monopoly 30 years ago, and failed because they didn't invest in the future. They didn't want to innovate. They didn't want to risk the things that made them a lot of money, which is a classic mistake. They teach that in business school. And so they didn't they didn't change, and they didn't take advantage, and all the smart people left newspapers, and you're left with, newspapers that are sort of a shell of themselves, that are being owned by people who are in it for the money and are just trying to milk the properties for whatever they can get out of them, until they die. And the readers are deserting. Almost every newspaper circulation now is a tenth of what it was 5 or 10 years ago. The Washington Post, when I was there, had 820,000 circulation a day, and now it's under 100,000, and that's in a market that's twice as big as it used to be. That's dying. The Asheville paper has gone from 25,000 to 5,000. Those are the numbers throughout the industry. It's people are reading on their phones, and they're reading on their computers, and they don't want to read in print anymore.
Well, they
And
only,
newspapers, by clinging to paper, newspapers failed to understand that their business. It's the old joke about the railroads thought they were in the railroad business, didn't know they were in the transportation business. Newspapers thought they were in the printing business and didn't understand they were in the news business.
and it's a shame, as you said, because Asheville paper, you name it, they used to get, 48-page paper, 64-page paper,
Now it's a cocktail napkin.
if that. And when I stopped, I told you story, the Wall Street Journal, I just stopped getting print publications. You don't miss them at all. Last question, if I can, what do you tell somebody, either an individual or a company, to make sure this doesn't happen? Let's take the example you mentioned. For example, there's still newspapers, even where we are, there's still a few. What do you tell somebody to make sure that this doesn't happen to you in 10 years or 20 years from now?
Be open to change. Be willing to experiment. Be willing to take chances. Don't fight it. As I think we mentioned earlier, there was a lot of pushback in newspapers as this stuff happened, because, oh, it's different, it's changing, it changes the way we do our work, it changes the way we make our money, therefore we shouldn't do it. That was a really bad call. It is, and again, these are things they teach in business school. It's like the horseless, the going from the horse to the automobile. But we make buggy whips. Why would we stop making buggy whips? Well, um, and I think that's, newspapers became buggy whips, unfortunately, in a world where the automobile is now the internet.
And by the way, great example, and I can see it also, I said with fax machines. And fax machines,
Yeah,
that's a very short life. That lasted maybe 5 years for something.
yeah.
I remember my first fax machine. I probably still have it lying around somewhere, but who would have thunk you can't do anything with it? If people want to track you down or find out what's going on in that mind of yours, is there a way to follow you?
I'm a little bit. I'm on Blue Sky as Potsmark, occasionally. Uh, LocAlmanac.com is there, although there's not much on it because right now it's pretty much a brochure for what we're building. There'll be more there soon. Um, so that's probably the best way to find me.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Mark, for being my guest on the Station of Blaine's World podcast. Also, I thank
Thank you.
my producer, Cappy Cassetti, and hopefully one of these days we'll bump into each other or see each other. That'd be cool. But I really enjoyed this chat. Thanks, man.
Thank you.